Paranormal Experience Radio with Kat Hobson covers paranormal experiences, haunted locations, and their histories. High strangeness, including cryptozoology, ufologists, psychics, mediums, authors, and media personalities. Join her as she seeks to bring light to those things that exist by hiding in the dark. And here she is, your intrepid host, Kat Hobson.
Hello there. I am so glad that you're joining me tonight because this is going to be a rocking show. I am going to Scotland in June, like y'all don't know that, and I'm going to be attending the Scottish Paranormal and UFO Conference. Well, I met the most delightful woman when I was in Scotland 2 years ago, and she is joining me. She is going to be presenting at the conference. She is just absolutely brilliant. She is an operator at Culross, and if you watch Outlanders, it's one of the castles there. It's beautiful. It is yellow. It sits by the sea. It's in the most quaint village. At the top of the hill is an abbey, and they have a statue of a unicorn, which nobody believed me when I told them that the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland, but it is. And I mean, they believe. I don't know if Linda's seen one, but we're going to find out. But she is fantastic. She is also Blue Eyes Hypnotherapy, and she works with the Land Trust. So hence Culross, I believe. We'll find out. But Linda Whiteford is somebody that is delightful and beautiful inside and out, and you're going to get to learn a little about her. So, hello, Linda.
Hi, Kat. Oh my God, my head is bursting.
You've made me
sound so clever and so nice.
You are so clever and so nice. So,
Thank you so much.
When we first met, I had no idea what Culross was. Okay. I had not been, the tour I was on did not provide a lot of information going in. They assumed that everyone knew everything. But when I saw the town was perfect. I mean, it is the epitome of what an historic visit to a small Scottish town should look like. And the hospitality was there. There was kind of a street market there, which was fun. I was there with good friends. And I always tell people that although I can in no way endorse that tour, I will always endorse Scotland. And you made part of that so special and so interesting.
Oh.
And I can't even imagine how little I would have learned about that area without you. Oh. And Greg Stewart took me up through the village. You took care of the Culross stuff. And I mean, I was so uninformed. I didn't even know that it had been used in Outlanders. That's the name of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outlanders.
Yep.
And I went to so many places that when I started watching the show, because a true Outlanders fan is coming with us this June, when I started watching the show, I would be in places and not know it. And it was just like, after the fact, I was like, really? That was... yeah. But Culross stands on its own. It was magnificent. The history was great. You were great.
Oh.
Gregor was there with us, and he always says that I'm the only person besides his wife and maybe his mom that calls him Gregor. So Greg was there with us.
Only when he's being naughty.
He's the only Gregor I know, and I love that name. So, and he answers to it.
Like.
Yeah, he doesn't mind. He's a good friend.
That was a special day, and I have to say I remember it very well because we didn't expect you in Culross that day. We didn't know you were coming. And when I
Oh,
was walking between the palace, the Culross Palace where I work, and I'm duty manager, where I was walking between Culross Palace and our shop, which is 100 yards down the road in a townhouse in the middle of the village,
yes.
I saw this person that looked like Greg. And I
Yes.
know Greg from over years. And then I saw beside him this tall guy with a beard, and
Right.
that was Rick McCallum. And I thought, what the? This is Sunday. This is a weird. Sunday is when we have the Sunday market on the
Yes.
green in Culross as well. And it was just magical. And I thought, what on earth are you doing here? And they said the tour hadn't kind of worked out, and so you were spending time in Culross. And wow, it was brilliant. And I managed to get you guys in later on in the palace. And even though we were busy, but at the end of the day, and then, well, Rick saw his spirit, and he was
Full body.
full body
Full
apparition.
body.
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
story behind that too. But it's a special. It's a really, really special place, and it's the best example of a 16th stroke 17th stroke 18th century village in the whole of Scotland, could say Britain. But in the 1970s, when everywhere else was knocking down roads to widen them to make way for big cars and lorries and
Yes.
get people through faster, and knocking houses down and building, what was then modern, state-of-the-art flat-roofed buildings and flats and tower blocks. We couldn't afford to do that in Culross, and so the buildings, they did get a bit dilapidated over the years, but they didn't change a thing. And then, of course, all these planning laws come into the fold, and you can't. It's now a conservation area. You cannot change anything. You have
Thank
to have
goodness for
permission.
those.
Oh my goodness. So the streets are the same size they were 400 years ago. And and the houses have been done up. I mean, we haven't even started about the National Trust for Scotland, who I work for, who basically bought Culross Palace, which is a 16th century merchant's house, basically. It's not a palace. It's one man's palace. But that was a misprint in the title deeds in about 1800s. And somebody was trying to sell it. Lord Dundonald was trying to sell it. And his lawyer wrote down Palladinum, which means a Latin word meaning nobleman's property, basically.
Yes.
And somebody else read it as palace and thought, oh, well. And it sold well, being a palace. But
yes. I mean, palace
it's
or palladium, I'd rather have a palace.
it's the most beautiful little building, and it's ochre coloured, because a rich man could make his property any colour he wanted. And in 1597, when this building was first built, George Bruce, who built it, who was the wealthy merchant, he used what was available. And as the man who created the world's first underwater coal mine, he used what was there, and there were seams of iron, ferrous oxide, and he used the iron in the lime wash, and so boom, you've got your yellowy ochre coloured building.
How cool is
And it
that?
shines in the sunshine. It's beautiful.
Yes, it does. I didn't get to see much sunshine when I was there until the afternoon.
Well, we haven't seen
in the
that this year,
afternoon, it
but
was
it's coming.
stunning.
You're going to bring it to us.
I'm going to do my best.
Thank
I
you.
am. But I figured that I have, the little rubbers to put on my shoes, and I'm going to bring my rain jacket, and that way I won't need them. Although I may wait and buy another one there.
It's never the wrong kind of weather. It's the wrong kind of clothes.
It's not. It is. And, it's so interesting because we were there in historically record-setting heat. That heat wave was, we did bring the heat. We're sorry.
No, we love it. I can't bear it when anybody moans about being too hot. Oh, be quiet.
Yes. Well, I didn't hear a lot of people doing that while we were there. We were sweating to pieces because we had packed for what we expected in Scotland. But I am a Southern American, so we can have 4 seasons in one day here.
Sure.
So I
So
don't ever. I always have layers.
Good. That's the way you should be. And you know, just a wee rain jacket or an umbrella or something, you know, it always helps. But at the
Yes.
moment, I don't know, this year's been really cool and windy and wet. And even the plants are kind of tight just now. They're not blossoming as fast as they usually do. And I would say we're a few weeks behind, you know,
Yes.
with all the blossom and the leaves and the flowers and everything. But it'll come. It'll come.
It always does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
Well,
good.
I would like to talk some about the land trust because I already was aware of it before we got there, simply because I read novels and I love, you know, different authors. And one of them focuses on Scotland for her
Mhm.
characters and characterizations. And so a lot of the characters in her books are landed people, landed
Mhm.
gentry, and who, as happens most of the time, are not able to maintain things once they don't have the servants and the this, that, and
Yep.
the other. So their
Yep.
properties are leased as kind of like B&Bs through
Mhm.
the Scottish Land Trust.
Mhm.
And so when I found out about that, when I read about that, I was like, I should know what that is. So
Mhm.
when I got to your property and Greg said, "Oh yeah, she's with the Land Trust," I was like, "Really?"
A
But we
National
didn't really
Trust.
get it.
It's
The
the
National
National
Trust,
Trust for Scotland. Yeah.
yes. And so I was just like, we never got a chance to talk about that, but it's such
Mhm.
an important program, isn't it?
Oh gosh, yes. It was
Yes.
formed by some gentleman in 1930, and it was basically because, as you say, after the war, First World War, and then the Second World War was on the way. After the First World War, a lot of huge mansions and castles and estates couldn't exist anymore because they lost so many of their men in the war.
Yes.
And so there was nobody left really. I mean, the women were doing everything they could, but you know, you needed the men to go and work and work the land and work
Well, it takes a lot to
houses.
maintain an
I mean,
estate.
it's just a huge estate. Yeah, there's jobs for everyone, and you really do need your menfolk. Um, and so they lost a whole lot of these people, and so estates began to dwindle. They began to fall apart at the seams, and landowners would live for example, I know of one family who moved into the turret of one of their castles. They couldn't keep the other ones. There was an awful lot of demolishing of castles, taking the roofs off of
Yes.
mansions because they couldn't afford the taxes to keep them as proper homes.
Yes.
And they would live honestly like paupers. A lot of them, they'd be selling their paintings and their jewels. I mean, it's not easy for someone even to be left a mansion or a castle to look after. Where do you get the money from? How do you pay for everything if your family's not terribly wealthy? There was an awful lot of
Yes.
buildings that were demolished. So anyway, that's the background. The National Trust for Scotland was created in like 1930, and so people decided to do something about this to try and protect, because it's not just the fact that it was some, you know, posh family home. It's the
Right.
fact that there's so much artwork and the masonry and the woodwork, the joinery, just the beauty of some of these places, and they're so special, and people learn from all these things, you know.
Yes.
The maintenance of them, you know, even polishing brasses, you know, is an art form in a way. Even putting up a chandelier is an art form in a way. I mean, I'm sort of not making fun of it, but all
No,
these
you're
little,
not. I mean, you're right. Everything
even
that goes into
sharpening a
building
sword.
them and maintaining them.
Yeah, so all these little crafts and all the beautiful artwork inside these buildings were so special and done by some of the most foremost artists in our time in the past few hundred years. So they realized these things were special and had to be protected. In 1932, one of the very first properties they bought was Culross Palace. because it was basically falling apart. The roof was caving in, but they still had some of the amazing painted woodwork inside from 1597. When they bought Culross Palace for £700 in 1932, they also at the same time bought 6 little cottages in the village for £100. That's 6 cottages.
6 for £100?
6 for £100. So that was a pretty good deal. But these little houses, some of them not so little, were becoming a bit decrepit. There wasn't a lot of industry going on in the town. They had started building modern social housing at the top of the hill behind the palace. And people ask us these days, what on earth are those ugly council houses doing up at the top of the hill? And I say, well, they're part of the story, because they were state-of-the-art, modern social housing looking down on a slum village, basically. And nobody wanted to come and stay here. But when the trust started doing up these little houses, making them habitable, painting the outsides, rendering the outsides again, pebble dashing them, as we call them, or we call it harling. I think you call it pebble dashing the buildings, and painting them again and making the place look much more livable and beautiful. We rented out the houses. We've done up about 58 now, I think. We still have 27 as tenanted properties. But that was the beginning of the Little Houses project, which went all throughout Scotland. And it meant that not only were we preserving the mansions and the great castles and all the rest of it, but we were preserving the ordinary people's homes, and like the butcher's house in Culross, or the weaver's house in Culross, or the seaman's mission, or the nunnery. They're all together in one part of town, and we didn't have any nuns, but there were ladies that provided a service, but just not a religious one.
It's equally moving, probably.
People are living in them, and oh my God, it's one of my most special thrills is if somebody moves out of a home. Or the other day I was asked to go and visit a home, the butcher's house, and this lovely lady called Linda lives there, and she just wanted me to come and look at a plaque that was on outside the wall of our home, and it had 2 sets of initials, and that's just a normal marriage lintel, because in old days people would have their initials, and sometimes a love heart in the middle, the husband and the wife, on the outside of their building, and but there was a cleaver, and there was something else, and I said, well, that's a butcher's knife, and that's a steel for sharpening the knife next to it. So that we got that. And then we went inside, and oh my goodness, what a thrill. I'd been in it when it was empty before, but this lady had brought so much wonderful energy to this house. It was just divine. And I mean it, it was divine. And she'd made it just suited her. She said, this is my forever home. This is my forever home. And I said, well, I know why, because I could see a spirit just standing not far from us, and I got the name Margaret, and as soon as I said the name Margaret, we were standing in her kitchen, and you could hear a rustle of like crinoline, like it's like,
oh my,
and it was just to the side, and I said, do you know why this is Margaret here? And we both heard it. It was as loud as anything, like she'd just sort of crossed her legs or something, and I said, she's here because she looks to me. I could see her. She looks like your twin sister, but she's in crinoline and you're in modern sort of clothing, but she's so happy you're here. And then I had to say to the lady, there's not many men come in here, are there? And she said, no, I divorced 18 years ago and she doesn't have a son. She's got a daughter and she doesn't live here anymore. But and I said, well, she's so happy because she just had it up to here with men. And she loves that you're here with her, and she's looking over you and you're looking after her house, and it's happy days. And oh my goodness, it was lovely. It was so nice. We're best friends.
Well, you should be.
Oh, it was just what a treat. But these houses are so special. And like the palace, the former spirits love them so much that they haven't moved out. And they're my other colleagues.
Well, you know what? they're not bad ones to have because they tend to look after who they love.
I
So
think so.
even if they're not originally yours,
Yeah.
I have
Oh, no,
found.
I think well, that's another story. I do think I was brought to the palace for a reason. And
Really?
I'm a hypnotherapist as well. I've kind of taken a break from that just now because I'm exhausted because I've been looking after a 17-year-old little dog who needs out every 2 hours through the night, and
Yeah.
so I don't believe you can heal people when you haven't healed yourself yet. So
I agree.
a wee back seat from that just now, but I do believe I was brought to the palace because I'd been there in a former life. Now, that's a whole nother story. And I have regressed other people who I'm really good friends with, who I know I've known in that former life. That's a whole nother story.
Well, do you think that it's just one former life that you're living there?
It's so funny you should ask that. And you really don't know this. But
I
no,
don't.
I have
What?
another life there as well, because bringing it back to the conference that's happening in June, Alison, the conference organizer, brought her husband, Ian, who's a very good medium, to visit one night. I just said, look, come on round when everybody's gone, and we'll just have a wander around, after the gates are closed at 5. And oh my goodness, he was being bombarded with spirit and
Wow.
so much information. And it was brilliant because I write everything down. I've been there 10 years now. And for the first couple of years, I just kind of did wee investigations here and there. And I didn't really, well, I did, of course, I paid notice, but I didn't write them down. But over the past, I would say, 8 years, I've been writing everything down that the staff, the visitors, and I have been picking up on or have experienced. And it's just mind-blowing what we've found in the palace. And when I took Ian and Alison, the conference organizer, and her husband round, one of the things he found was in the room where Rick saw that figure just off it, he said, Linda, there's this chap in here. There's a spirit in here. He looks a bit like Gandalf with a beard. And he's a healer, but you would call him a sort of a wizard. People would, if you say wizard, you kind of get the idea he's used to dealing with sort of magical things. But he said this guy is from the land way, way before this palace was built. And he said he was. I keep doing this with a sort of circular motion that he was drawing the circle. And he this is in the room in the palace. We haven't got to talk about the palace properly yet, but there's a room in the palace called the Strong Room. And it was the most heavily protected room in the whole of the area, never mind just the building. It's 3 foot thick stone all the way around, ceiling.
Oh, wow.
It's cannonball proof and it's fireproof because George Bruce, who built the place, was the laird of the area. He was the tax collector. He was the richest man in the area as well. He was a good guy, but he earned his money. And so this room has had so much magic and protection put on it over the years. And so it's not surprising that you'll find this wizard kind of character there. So when Ian told me, he said, there's a guy, Gandalf, and he doesn't mind you calling him Gandalf. And he sort of did this circular thing, and he said he's used to having a sort of magic circle, but it's from the land way before the palace. And he said, oh, by the way, you're here for a reason, Linda. And he said, you're his sister. And I thought, you know what, if I ever form a pop group or anything, some musicians, it's going to be Gandalf's sister.
I love that.
I claim it now. But
that's perfect.
That didn't surprise me in the slightest, because I feel very much at home there, and I've never had any sort of feelings in that room. The room does not like males in it because they're suspicious. Any sort of male coming in might be there to steal something. And it's the room where the laird would have kept all the papers that proved who he was, all the money, all his valuables, because banks weren't invented until 1695. So
okay.
a rich man needed somewhere to keep all his papers that proved who he was, because you couldn't go around with a wee oil painting on your jumper, saying that's me,
I'm the
So
laird. Yes.
so you needed your seals and your wax seals, and all your papers and everything in a safe place. And this was his safe place. But isn't it funny that my wizard man is there? He chose to be there. And I
Yes.
do believe that it makes sense. And I felt really honored that this had been brought to the fore. And Ian said, well, you're here because he kind of brought you here, and because it's natural to you to be here. And it does. It feels very much like home to me. And lots of other people, mediums, have found that that room has had a doctor, or they say there's a doctor kind of guy in there. Didn't describe him, but they said there's a doctor or a healer in there, and that's my Gandalf.
How cool is that?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, that is.
It all just makes sense, and oh goodness, the other life story is quite fascinating. But I'll let you ask a question first.
No, I'm sitting here. I mean, I'm learning all of the things that some of them I felt, some of them I didn't. And I was really not due to the circumstance, I was not wide open because of the people I was with. Oh. And while I was getting some impressions, I wasn't getting a lot, which was frustrating to me, that I had to be, kind of blocking a little bit, because I knew there was a lot there. And especially when I went up the hill to the Abbey, I so knew that there were people that were wanting to talk in the cemetery. And it was very hard just to let go. But I found it interesting because Andrea, who was there with us, was on the other side of the cemetery doing the same thing. And we have very similar skill sets, she and I. I think I don't ever talk really about mine, but it was so cool, because that was kind of validation for me of what I was feeling, but I couldn't get anyone to really show me who they were. And that whole town, because I just took off and started walking up to the Abbey. And, I totally missed Greg showing people the house with eyes until after I was coming back down. And he was like, you can't leave. You have to come this way. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I think that it's only fitting that you were Gandalf's sister, because
funny. It's funny hearing someone else say that. He likes the name Gandalf, but it wasn't his name. But I haven't got his name yet, so he likes being called Gandalf because people know what that looks like, Yeah. So
we could have called him Albus, but I think they're kind of the same.
Albus. Oh, we'd like that.
Albus Dumbledore. So Harry Potter. I am so very, I was nailed by this town. And we had stopped on the way in, and Mikey, one of the men with us, had a drone and put flowers on the stone in the sea.
Oh yeah.
Where,
Lily,
the young woman.
Grave. Yeah.
Yes. And I know that I do watch Scottish Paranormal when they do their things. And I like it when they do it, because I know those people.
Yeah.
And I was watching Haunted Scotland, and they were up there in one of the areas of Culross, and it was just
the West Kirk. Where were they? Was it the West Kirk? That's the Black Kirk in Outlander. If anybody's an Outlander fan, that's where they filmed. They called it the Black Kirk.
It's an old
Kirk.
Is that? I thought they said the toll booth.
All right. Oh yeah.
Toll booth.
Yeah, the toll booth and the townhouse. Yeah.
And they seem to be having.
I see what you mean. We see over here. We call that series "Spooked Scotland."
But yes, in America, thank you.
It's called Haunted Scotland. Haunted Scotland is also the group that Greg has Scottish Paranormal, they also
Yes.
use Haunted, so I was getting confused there, sorry.
Well,
But
it
yeah,
does get a little bit
Haunted
so.
Scotland on the telly with Chris Fleming. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yes.
they were in the townhouse. Yeah, totally. That's one of our buildings.
And they were talking about the witch's treatment
Yeah.
while they were there.
Uh-huh.
And I was kind of surprised because it wasn't the same energy that I had gotten. And I didn't go to the toll booth. I was not physically in that structure, to my knowledge. But you know all the places I was.
Yeah.
But I did not get that sense while I was there.
Well, I'll need to take you back there. Because you know what, they only touched on that in the program. But I have taken a few people up there now. It's not open to public. The townhouse attics basically are where latterly they put the accused souls, called witches, men and women. And a witch could be your neighbor, could be anybody. You know, it's not a lady with a black hat on, you know, Hollywood.
Was it generally people that somebody had a problem with, so they turned them in as a witch?
The woman that's buried on the beach, Lilias AD, she's buried on the beach because she died in custody. She wasn't proven guilty of being a witch. Do you know why they picked on her? It was because she was supposed to have been dancing with the devil at dusk or something. And the poor soul probably had some sort of mental disability, but also she had a protruding jaw. She had an underbite. She looked a wee bit weird. So she's the first person that anybody could call a witch.
Oh.
If you didn't like your neighbor, if your neighbor hadn't been to church for 2 weeks, or if they suddenly got a mark on their face, or they walked with a limp, or any reason, you could say, Mrs. Brown turned my cow's milk sour. And that would be enough to cast suspicion. And then Mrs. Brown would be taken to the townhouse, not the toll booth's different, to the townhouse. And basically in Culross, on the ground floor of the building, it was a series of prison cells for ordinary criminals. And then in the middle flooring, there was a council chamber and the courtroom. And then right at the top in the attic rooms, there's just 2 attic rooms. That's where they put the witches, because there was no more space in the church steeple, because originally they would put them in the church steeple. And the reason that they have them up in the attic or on the top of the church steeple was because you kept them away from the devil, who was down below. So you kept them as far apart as possible so they could have no more dealings with the devil. And then they did the most unspeakable things in the way of torture to try and eke out a confession. And the longer, in a lot of cases, the longer you took to confess, the more the families had to pay. And the money went to the councillors and the minister. So we had so many witch trials all over Scotland. I mean, there 4,000, I think, was the one recorded, because they could be torturing all sorts of people and not forget to record it, or maybe they died in the process. It was a terrible, terrible time, and the easiest way of creating paranoia. And you mean your poor Mrs. Brown, who was innocent, or Lilias AD, who just happened to look a bit different. Men as well, not just women. We forget about the men. It's not just all about women. Mostly women, 70% women. But they would be tortured to within an inch of their life. They would be, there's all sorts. They would rape, they'd shave them, they would prick them with pins about this big. They would thumb screws, they would hang them up with a rope and let them down. I've actually experienced that. I channel as well. And I know, people, sometimes when I take them up there over the years, I'm saying not very many at all do I take up there, because I just think it's disrespectful. But I want to let people experience what they went through, just a little bit of it. And you can get the feeling of being strangled, and you can get the feeling of feeling sick or just sheer panic. But I experienced, I'm sure, what it was like for the last moments of one woman, and being strangled and let down, strangled and let down, strangled, and they keep them awake for 24 hours or longer. And this, I think, felt this woman pass, and it was the most peaceful. It was like, release, complete release. And those poor people went through hell. and that is in the walls. People dismiss the stone tape theory, but oh my God, can you feel it there?
It's very true.
Oh my goodness.
Stone tape theory is real.
Yeah, I took a Scottish comedian and presenter. She's a former lawyer called Susan Calman up there in 2020, just after lockdown. And she was doing the series on telly called Secret Scotland, and just going around the country and showing bits of Scotland that people don't normally get to see. And she did know that that's where they kept witches, so-called witches. And I did warn her that some people feel a bit weird when I take them up the stair.
Right.
And basically, when we got to the top of the stairs to the attic room, there is one that's not so bad as the other. And she couldn't go through the door. And she's only 5'0". And she was like holding the door, she couldn't go through. And it took a long time for the crew to say, oh, come on. They were going to Lilias Sadie's grave on the beach as well.
Right.
There was another, I don't know if we mentioned that she was also accused of being a witch, but they wanted to hurry up, get the interview done. So they got her in the door. She had to hold herself up with a pile of chairs, but she just started sobbing. And she's a sensible woman. I mean, she doesn't do this. She said, I've never felt like this in my life before. And she said, this is not a place to take tourists paying 10 quid to take selfies in a room that was used for horrific things. And when we were talking, it was all being filmed. There was this almighty crash from the next room next door, and there was nobody there. And she said, what was that? And I said, they're listening. They're listening. Yeah. And it was great telly. They kept all the crying in, but she took about an hour to recover outside in the fresh air. But when I went up there with Chris and the team to film Haunted Scotland or Spooked Scotland over here, he felt all that. And then Chris actually said something that I hadn't even thought about before, in that when the bells go, because I did warn them about the bell going on the hour, and it's loud. And I said, right, you will wet yourself if you're not ready. There could be accidents.
So pay attention. Yes. Wow.
Do you know when the bells chimed in the clock tower, everything was electric. It was like it was charging. You know, like a Tibetan singing bowl.
I do. I have one that I use.
I'm getting the goosebumps just telling you this. That's what it's like up there, and they being the spirits that are still there, love it, and they love to be people looking up at the clock and looking up and then remembering. And I think my job, part of it anyway, is to keep that story going, to keep telling their story and to remembering them and what happened there. I've got another story about up there as well. I've got pictures I could be showing as well, but it's a special place, but we will never open that up. We will never.
It shouldn't be open. You know,
no.
Here we have Salem.
Oh yeah.
And although women's
hysteria.
Yes. And a lot of people go to Salem for tourism. It's a big tourist town.
Yeah.
And I have never gone there because I don't feel that's respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be with somebody going through there. Like if I'm in an environment where someone passed or whatever has happened. And like you, I agree. I think that the release was a blessing because you knew you weren't getting out. So why not just go ahead and finish this? I have been places like in New Orleans where there was a great slave trade here and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't. I mean, before I learned how to shield properly, when I was young and went there, it was just like, what is this? And there's still some of the voodoo shops where the negativity is so strong that I went in one and I could feel the reader feel me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with other people who were also sensitive, and they were like, oh, you're a target. And I'm like, thanks. Yeah, just let's go now. But I mean, people bring their own light or darkness with them.
Don't they?
So I completely agree. I think that I think that Salem should not be doing like tours into the places where things actually occurred.
My wee brother, my darling little brother, Leonard, who's a bit of a character, he has written lots of books in history. But his first book, called The Wee Witch, was based about the witch trials, 28 witch trials in a little fishing village along the coast of Fife. And I learned an awful lot about the witch trials from this. I didn't have a clue. We didn't get taught this when we were growing up, you know.
Oh my.
Every village in the whole of Scotland have a connection with a witch or witch trial. And my brother wrote this book, and it was mind-blowing, really, because he had found, when my dad died in 1991, and sad that it was, we inherited a lot of the things that he collected. I have a couple of paintings behind me, for example. Thanks, Dad. But my brother inherited a few of my dad's books, and he used to collect all sorts of things. He was so interested in standing stones, in ancient history, ducats, dovecots, you know, because every estate would have had a very fancy ducat to keep pigeons over the winter. We call pigeons doos here, and people used to raise them for meat. And the big fat pigeons, they're not just the city types, you know, they're proper wood pigeons. But Dad had lots of interest, and he collected lots of ancient paintings and books, and my brother Lenny inherited the books, and a lot of them were the statistical accounts for Scotland from about the 1500s onwards. And these are records. I mean, we were very literate Scottish people. And these are sort of accounts of what happened in each town and village over the years in the whole of Scotland. And they're fascinating. And of course, we thought they were really boring when we were small, you know, Dad would pore over them and, you know, boring. But my brother got into them and started finding out about witches. And we've always been interested in spooky things. We grew up in a house that was built in 1776, and there was nothing spooky in it. But I think when we moved out, and my mum moved into a care home, and my younger brother, moved into the house with his sons, it was only then they started seeing spirits or faces at the window. I thought,
oh my!
Maybe that was my dad, or you know. But we never experienced anything spooky in the house at all. But I was fascinated with real ghost stories, true ghost stories, because we were only 10 miles. We grew up in Upper Largo. It's a little village by the sea. And Largo's where the real Robinson Crusoe was born and brought up. Alexander Selkirk. And anyway, but we're 10 miles from St Andrews. We're by the sea, near lots of fishing villages. So you've got all their superstitions. You've got your farmers inland. It's a beautiful place to be, and of course I work in Culross now, which is on the other side of that county of Fife, which is wonderful. But we get the sea, we get the land, and we get ancient land and ancient towns. And St Andrews is one of the most ancient ones and the most historic ones and the most important. It's the oldest university, and it's just the most wonderful place. And both sets of my grandparents lived there, so I used to go and spend my holidays there. And there's so many ghost stories. And I mean, Gregor maybe told you about some of them. I don't know if you ever get a chance to do a tour with him. I would recommend.
We did a 40-minute walking tour with Greg, and that was all we got to do, and that's all we got to do in St Andrews.
Oh, it's not just famous for golf.
No, it's not. And we were scheduled there during the British Open.
Oh gosh! Oh, busy.
Yeah,
and university town, and oh my goodness. Well, I don't envy you that, but I grew up wandering these streets and being terrified because I'd read a story about the screaming skull and the brown nun, and oh my goodness,
yes,
or the brown witch rather. And the headless nun and blah, blah, blah.
Nun, yeah.
And then, so my brother was reading all these stories about the witch trials, which you'd never heard of. and Largo being involved in a witch trial. I thought, witches? What? So we did a lot of research, and eventually he ended up writing this book called The Weem Witch, and it's about Pittenweem, which is a little fishing village. It used to be very, very wealthy place because they had lots of boats going out making a fortune from fishing, and very good farming country and land, and so they were very, very wealthy from the farming. Very beautiful sort of golden sort of area. And then in about, gosh, it was 1500 and something, there was a cry for men to come and join to fight in the Battle of Kilsyth. Now, Kilsyth is not far where I live now, and it's kind of halfway in the middle of Scotland, and between Glasgow and Edinburgh and north a wee bit. And so about 200 men went away to fight in a battle there, and only about 70 came back. So again, like the mansions after the war and the castle, the boats and the farms were left to rot because the women folk couldn't keep them all. They couldn't go to raise their kids and run a farm and go out to sea at the same time. So a lot of these things were left. And so what was the easiest thing to do, especially when King James VI had just written a book about how to catch your witch and to conduct a witch trial? James VI, and first of Scotland, Mary Queen of Scots' son, he was the biggest witch hunter of them all. So if your king was telling you and giving you free range to go and look for evil and the devil and, you know, your witches, boy,
Wow.
did you. So the best thing to do if you had a corrupt minister or corrupt councillors in a town was to say to the wealthiest women in the town, you didn't go to church last week, or you're walking with a limp, or did you see her? Somebody saw her with a black cat dancing last night in the woods. That would be enough to take that woman into to be tortured in the toll booth in Pittenweem, in the church tower, and accused of witchcraft. And they had, in this tiny little place, they had 28 witch trials, one of whom was a man who died, Thomas Brown. And it was unbelievable. If you could see the size of this place, it's tiny, but the church is quite big and the churchyard is there. You could imagine the screams being heard all throughout the village. People would be terrified to set a foot wrong. And even a councillor's wife was accused, you know, because he was having an affair.
Oh my word.
Because I mean, so Len's book is all about this, and it went further than that. It went out with Pittenweem. It was throughout the whole of Scotland, and
Yeah, that's astounding.
Amazing. And then we find out that they had a witch in Largo, and then he found out we had two ancestors who were burned as witches in St Andrews, because one, Bessie Mason was her name, was going out with the son of Lord Anstruther in a little village called Kilconquhar, or the locals call it Kinacher, in Fife. And she had, the son was the boyfriend, and she got pregnant. So what's the best way of getting rid of this woman who's, you know, made a bit of a mishap in the family line and having a, excuse the language, bastard son? So they sent the son away to university in England, and they called Bessie Mason a witch. And she was burned at the stake in St Andrews. And because her mother protested too much about this being totally wrong and, you know, wrong, just total wrongdoing, she got called a witch as well, and she was burnt too. So that's two members of my direct. And we didn't know this before, you know, and this was happening everywhere. Just horrific. These poor souls, just, yeah. So I'm happy to be able to tell the story, and I will never, ever call myself a witch.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I wouldn't. You know, I've been called similar to a witch a lot.
Yes.
But
I get called lots of things.
Well, you know, that seems to be the go-to job when, you know, somebody's intimidated by an assertive person.
Yeah,
but
spooky one.
You're assertive, you know. But yeah. I would never call somebody that unless they had earned the title.
Yeah.
But I would certainly, you know, I'm like you. I don't get where people go out and tell everyone, I'm a witch. A witch.
Yeah.
Well, are you really? because what if the tide turns?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that I don't really know what I think about people who are natural, who have abilities, who can manifest good or can manifest healing or any of these things that are true gifts that you're given to help humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, even if you aren't comfortable with them, they're still kind of there. And that doesn't mean that you're going out trying to take down civilization as we know it, you know, and I don't know what the environment is like there, but here in the United States for some time now, we have had a lot of dissent, a lot of different sides and outlooks, and nobody, you know, a lot of intolerance, I guess is the best way to put that. And we are right now in our country seeing the greatest rise of anti Semitism
Yeah.
since Nazi Germany was being created. You know, since and it's happening in very elite institutions, educational institutions. And, you know, there were people on the street yelling into cameras, you know, I am Hamas. We are Hamas.
They don't
And I'm
know.
like, well, I think maybe these did because they were yelling it at Jewish students.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sitting there looking at how can we say that we've evolved from the period that we were initially talking about, and yet we still have this divide and this, you know, bigotry. And some of the people that are doing this would be greatly affronted if you were to say that they were bigots. Right?
Yeah. Do you know,
You can't step away from that.
No, it's just, I think this has gone on forever. And I've just been reading about genocide that happened in the 1000s. I mean, 1000s. We used to call it AD, but they call it CE now. And hatred and all sorts of evil happens through I mean, it's human. I mean, animals don't do
It is
these
apparently,
things,
yes.
Isn't it terrible? But
It
I
is.
think this is happening, and it's up to the good people to try and, you know, balance it out and to just try and speak louder. And I mean, do it with full heart and clear mind, and just to try and imagine. I mean, I always try and imagine what it's like for the other person. I'm rubbish in an argument.
I know, right?
I'm an empath. I know I can feel what they're feeling, and I know they're angry. But I mean, you just got to try and keep saying what you feel, but at the same
without
time,
attacking.
Yeah, but the genocide thing has been going on, and I've got so many things to say. Do you know Dublin? I mean, this blew my mind a few years back. I found out that Dublin was basically a Viking slave trading port. That's how it was founded. So there was slavery way back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, before they got into the, you know, the slavery with the Africans coming from, you know, and so on. And there were an awful lot of white slaves going on. I mean, you to find that the scattering of people was because the slave trading routes with the Vikings were going right round to Scotland and, you know, coming round. And it was bizarre. I had no idea about it. You don't get taught this in school. But I was reading about and this brilliant book called Crypt. I think you saw a picture of it.
I did see the picture of that. I'm getting that, by the way. It looked fascinating.
Dr. Alice Roberts. See, I've only got to the first chapter first because I'm trying to sort of keep it in my head. And that this King Ethelred from England, I mean, everybody's a mongrel. I mean, his blood was Norman from the French, and then a bit of German, and goodness knows. So we're all mongrels together. Who's got the right to say, you know, I'm better than you because I live here and everything? Well, it was going on back then. England was kind of sliced down the middle diagonally, and the Danes were on one side because the Vikings kept coming over. They call them the Danes, but they're basically the Norse and some of the Swedes and some of the Danish people were just trying to get better land and get a bit richer, I suppose. And so they would throw themselves in boats. Very good sailors they were. And they even got to China. You know, they were really clever people.
Yeah.
And they would come over, but they were trying to take over England and bash the abbeys, bash the churches, because that's where all the money was kept, and
Yes.
and then eventually they settled. Some of them settled very happily, but this Ethelred guy, King Ethelred, the first and the second, basically just thought one day, well, I don't trust these Danes. They've got half of England, and I want it back. Let's just kill all the Danes. And so he made this sort of statement and sent it out to all parts of England and said, look, if you've got any Danish people living there, just kill them, men, women, children. And they did. And this is what's in this book, is that they've been finding these piles of bodies with hack marks, not protective marks, with where a spear or a knife or anything would be, or a sword would be hitting the bone. And the bones are telling the story, the true story, that these were attacked running away. And it's just awful. Sorry.
That's okay. We are going to have to take a really quick break. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
So we will be right back after this. Y'all come back too.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Tautfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UNX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us #1 on Paranormal Talk Radio.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
Hey, UFO conference enthusiasts. We've got another great event for you in 2024. The Saucers and Aliens Kansas UFO Day in Dimension G is being held in the UFO capital of Kansas, Geneseo, on July 6th. This is a fun festival in the middle of nowhere. There will be a parade, decorated yards, costumes, vendors, speakers, and a showing of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Appropriately, an 8-foot-tall statue of Gort and a statue of Klaatu will be dedicated. This will be the only museum in the U.S. with these custom-made statues. If you'd like to donate to the statue project or attend the event, visit GeneseoMuseum.com. That's GENESEO Museum.com. Be sure to bring your camera when you attend the event. That's GeneseoMuseum.com.
Linda, we've been discussing all of these things, some of them disturbing. And, we have current events that are also disturbing. And sometimes we just have to remember to be very strong in our support of people, as opposed to going down that path of, being less than, as opposed to trying to be against something, helping people to be more for something that's not the eradication of other humans. Right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that's what our ancestors had to deal with all the time.
Yeah.
They were always looking for whoever next was going to come and bash them, or you had protective walls around towns for heaven's sake. And
for good reason.
We're lucky now that you can't just go about killing people. We've actually got laws and things, but they had to endure all sorts of things, whether it was things to do with your health. I mean, you really had to look out for your health and your wealth and your livelihood. And that's why they were so superstitious, with the witch trials and the things that they would around the palace. We've got protection marks around fireplaces and lots of buildings do.
I saw you doing that when they were investigating Culross on telly. Yeah. I was like, oh, I remember those witch marks.
Yeah.
So
we found more.
Where did they find new ones?
Well, it's a long story, but I've got time. If you have.
No, I've got all the time, because I was so impressed with your job. You get paid to do that. That's so awesome.
God, I'm so lucky. But the gosh, it's difficult to know where to start with the protection marks. People would be fearful of everything, and we talk about they'd be worried about losing their lives, worried about the health of their family, worried about their livelihoods. And so they would do anything to protect these things. And one of the most simple things they could do would be to put a mark around their fireplace of an evening. They would hang things at their windows or plant rowan trees. You call them mountain ash, we call them rowan trees, at their front doors or back doors to keep evil away. They would hang witch bottles or round bottles, because witches didn't like reflection and they didn't like round things. Anyway, put special things in them. They would hang them at their windows. They could hang things at their doors. You can't lock up your chimney, and that's the other way in to your livelihood and your home. So at night, they would put special marks around, protection marks around the fireplace, and they could be anything from a wee round circle with a cross in it, or we've got one that looks like a rope going down the middle of the fireplace in one of the rooms, or they would bury things above the doorways, or put them in the rafters, or behind their fireplaces. My brother Lenny, I mentioned earlier, has been to houses where they've found 3 mummified cats behind the fireplace. He's been to a castle in Fife where there was a dog's skull with wire wrapped around it, probably because they buried this dog alive behind the walls for some sort of to keep evil away. You find witch bottles, and this is all throughout Europe. You find witch bottles with a piece of wire, or a piece of metal rather, with a piece from an accused witch wrapped around it, whether it was a bit of cloth or a bit of hair, and usually some urine, which is very funny because we have this series on telly called Antiques Roadshow.
Yes.
I don't know if you have it in the States.
We do.
Basically, you know what they do? They people turn up with antiques, and then the expert tell you the story about them and tell you how much they're worth. Well, there was a time when the glassware expert got a bit of a fright, because this was a come back next week and find out what happened thing, because he had to take the glass bottle away and get it tested. And but not before he had a wee taste of what he thought was wine inside it. And it turned out to be a protection bottle with ancient urine in it. So you live and learn. But anyway, there's all these bottles and things, and my brother has a collection of them. And but I've even got pictures I can show you. In 2020, I took some friends, I owed a favour to, up to the attic where the witch's prison was, and the accused witch's prison. And my friend, bearing in mind that nobody had been up there for ages, all through lockdown, my friend found this little mummified shoe. Now, I'm going to hold up a picture. Can you see that? This little boot.
I can see that.
Okay. Here's another one. Here's a better one. It's like
Oh.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
It's a little boot. It was very dry. You can see the sort of rusty bits where the eye holes for the laces were. And this is the bottom of it. Okay. Again, there we go.
Okay. Yes.
See that? It's got holes in it.
It was worn, yes.
I dated it eventually. No, nobody goes up there except the clock mender and me occasionally. And I don't know, our gardener goes up to check the fire safety stuff occasionally as well. She does lots of things. But I dated it to be like these boots there. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're little children's boots from the 1800s. So that was in 2020. And then in 2021, in May 2021, I got my really good friend Lee, because I've got my own little group called the 3 a.m. Club, and we're paranormal investigation group. We don't go out very much now because we're old and crusty and we've been there, done that. But we do love getting together, and we go away for weekends in castles stuff when we can. But we used to take, paying guests with us to go and visit places, raising money for the buildings we'd be investigating. But anyway, we've not done that for a while. So we got together in 2021. And this time, after we found the shoe, and I got Lee to do a bit of psychometry on it. He held the shoe and he said, oh, right, okay. He got the name John Sinclair. Don't know how to spell Sinclair, if it's S-T or S-I-N-C-L-A-I-R. And he said, little boy, and he said his mother gave the shoe so that the people of Culross could be safe from fire, protected from fire. This is what he was getting. And I thought, right, okay. And he said, oh, by the way, Linda, there's going to be a fire. And I thought, oh my God, not in my walk. Please. So it's one thing, and I'm touching wood now.
Can I have the shoe back?
Yes. It's one thing that this palace that's lined with wood, and it had been painted, every inch of the woodwork inside had been painted, and it's wooden floors, and it's stone built, but there's an awful lot of wood in it, and in it all its years, and I'm touching wood again, there's never been a major fire. Never been a fire. They had fireplaces in every room. This guy that built the place, George Bruce, was basically a laird, but he was a coal miner and he was a salt maker. So he had lots of coal to burn. So every room would have a fire. It was a really cozy place. But my God, the risks were there, because all the floors in his day, 1597 and onwards, were covered in bundles of grasses called thresh and bundles of herbs called strew. So the fire risk must have been horrendous. Never mind the big dresses and everything everyone was wearing, and that's the men as well. We'll get into that later. Anyway, so this little shoe turned up, and my friend did the psychometry, and he said, John Sinclair, wee boy, his mother gave the shoe, and we don't know if it was to the councillor or to the builders, because the facade of the townhouse building they put the clock tower on was in 1783. It was replaced and it was rebuilt. So that dates with the time of the shoe. So that kind of clicked. So he said, there's going to be a fire, Linda. 3 days later, I kid you not, I parked in Culross. We've got 2 free car parks on either side of the town. And I smelt the smell, the most acrid smell, and I saw the blue flashing lights of the fire engines. And the only thing that stopped me panicking was I saw a fire hydrant going across away from the palace, and I thought, well, it's not the palace, thank God for that. Do you know what it was? It was this, if you can see that grainy image, it's basically, get it right, Linda?
Yes.
It's a school bus, the back of the school bus on fire.
Oh, my word.
That's the street there. There's a little car. There's a car there. That's a pavement. There are trees. There are fire lamppost.
I know where that is.
Middle
Yes.
of town. It's just
Yes.
outside the townhouse. And basically, those flames were going up like 40, 50 feet. The school bus had gone on fire 3 days after my friend Lee had said that. And
Are you talking about Lee Dunn?
Yes. No,
Yes.
he's my buddy.
Brilliant psychic.
He's my other brother from another mother.
He's an awesome guy.
He nothing was damaged. There was no burning. There was no molten tar after they took the bus away. Nothing was damaged. The cars weren't damaged. The bus was damaged. It was incredible. And I swore that shoe is not going anywhere, because our conservators were saying, "Oh, Linda, that's a great story. Why don't we put it in a case and put it on display and, let it?" No.
No.
That's meant to be
Put it
up there
back.
for
Put
a
it back.
reason. Yeah. And it's gone
Yes.
back. It's on the shelf. I've got a note for anybody to see. Our conservators said, "Linda, do you want me to make the shoe look better? I could wet it and mold it." And no, just leave it.
No.
I've put some tissue paper inside it to keep it safe and to keep it formed. But that's the story that I need to tell, and I do tell. And it came out of the rafters then for a reason. And
Yes.
it's just, I am sure where that came out the rafters, that's where we found the new protection mark. I'm saying a new one, it's the one we haven't found. But we had because the palace is lined with this amazing 400-year-old painted wood, we had a conservator come out, and Karen is wonderful. She knows how to protect ancient wood. That's her speciality, and painted wood at that. And I wanted her to come and see the townhouse because I thought there was a bit of woodworm in the rafters, and she'd never been up before, so she was quite excited. And she came up, and she'd never heard this thing about protection marks. And I thought, wait a minute, she's worked in some of the biggest cathedrals and abbeys and castles in the whole of the British Isles, and she'd never heard about protection marks. So, but she knows somebody that does know about them. So she got in touch with her friend, because as she was working, looking at what I thought was live woodworm, but she puts a bit of paper over the top just to see if they're coming or going or whatever. Anyway, she's doing what she's doing. She said, "Oh, what's this?" And it was a little, it looked like a W mark, but it's not. It's called a Marian mark, as she found out from her friend, who I've now got the book of. This guy wrote a book about protection marks. Her friend is an expert. And it's a Marian mark because it's from Mary, the Virgin of Virgins. So it's 2 V's. And people used to put them up on their woodwork to protect what was inside. And I am damn sure that shoe was near there, because it was found literally underneath. Amazing.
That is amazing. I mean,
isn't it? It's a bit gobsmacking. But all through the palace, around the fireplaces, we have these marks as well.
Yes.
And obviously some of them are worn away because the palace roof wasn't as it should have been when we bought the place in 1932. So some of them got a wee bit worn. And then, of course, people will be touching them for years and years and years. And now we're light them up as best we can. It's best from each side so you can see them along the fireplaces. But for hundreds of years, they've been keeping the place safe and protected. And there are more marks around the fireplace near the strong room where Gandalf hangs out. And that was where the Sir George Bruce kept his money. More marks around there than anywhere else in the palace, except for the High Hall, which is another case in point. Where
in the palace area is the strong room?
In the Laird's bedroom. It's just off the Laird's bedroom, so it'd be the safest place, because he'd be guarded and his strong room's guarded. There were 2 heavy iron doors with bolts from the inside that kept him safe, or anybody working with his money safe.
Well, that was on the 2nd level, wasn't it?
Well, it's upper level. Everything of any value is upper level in the palace. George Bruce was a clever man. He being right next to the sea, he built in case there was a flood from the sea. So anything of any value is upper level. So his bedroom was upper level. But that's the room where Rick McCallum saw the man that took him away from the strong room, because they didn't want a man in the strong room. There was 4 females and me, I think, in the group. And I had the ladies in the strong room. He doesn't mind that. He loves a blonde. That's another story altogether. Our Sir George, I mean, not Rick. He probably loves a blonde as well. But
Rick was a blonde. Yeah.
But Rick was just in the doorway as we were in the room, and he said, "Oh, sorry, there's a fly." He said, "That's Rick. Maybe Rick the fly has come to bother."
We're talking about him. Yeah.
He basically saw, I'm sure he said he was headless, a man in period costume walk from the fireplace next to him to the door. And he didn't understand how this man could have come in without us hearing him, because the floorboards are quite squeaky. Mm-hmm. And so he followed him, and he said he was wearing a green jacket. And the weirdest thing is that that's the best way of getting a man out of that area.
Out of the area.
Women.
Yes.
The weirdest thing was he said it was a green jacket, a green period jacket. There was a red period jacket hanging on the back of a chair in the room.
There was.
Part of the dressing of the room, because it was a bedroom. And the next day, our needlework ladies, who work away all the time, they're beautiful embroiderers, they do all our authentic needlework in the palace. They replaced that green jacket, the red jacket, with a green one, just like Rick had. I didn't know it was. Oh my
gosh.
I didn't know it was
wild.
It was like foretelling the future in a weird way. But the guy obviously didn't want Rick to see his face, so he kept headless.
And, I think that's the majority of the reason. People are always freaked out when they see spirits headless or marred in some way. And it's the best way to hide your identity. But also, I think that I saw a spirit one time that was marred. It had scarring. Mm-hmm. But the person that was there wasn't damaged.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that was. Maybe I don't know why that was.
Well, do you know what? The more I'm at the palace, the more questions I have. But you try to sort of figure it out. But we don't have any nasty spirits in the palace. We've got feisty ones. We've got something for everybody. We've got who I call my cross-dressing colonel. We've discovered so much about him that I never would have believed when I first encountered him in investigations, because I thought he was one. He was married 4 times. This is Colonel John Erskine. He was George Bruce, the builder of the palace's great grandson. And Colonel John, we've got 2 portraits of him. One of him as a very big soldier, tough guy with a big wig on, literally a big wig, and his armor on. And then we've got him. Well, at the time, people could choose paintings. Artists would go around rather, with paintings, really fancy paintings and fancy frames, but without the head. And you could choose the painting or the pose that you wanted and have your head put on that painting. Now, that in Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh, where the royal family have a home when they come to Scotland, there's a whole room full of one guy's face on all these paintings from generations. It's bizarre. But anyway,
it is bizarre.
Our Colonel John obviously did the same, because there's a painting of, it's like a lady, with lady hands, and it looks like a lady's outfit. It's meant to be a Roman centurion, but it's very effeminate. And it's his head on the top, and he must have chosen it. It's the most bizarre painting. So I always say, this is Colonel John by day in his armor, and this is Colonel John at night, because I know he loved a party. Oh my God. We've got another building next to us. It's built in 1611. We call it the North Wing or the North Block. And he used to have parties there, a bit like the Hellfire Club. But it was also a Masonic lodge. So it's very masculine. And that's where, if you're a single male, you'll hear things, you'll feel things. We've had men being goosed. We've had all sorts of things going on. And they just love it. And that's where I got called a useful harlot once. Lucky me. Lucky
you.
That was about 8 years ago. And then this year, when I was brushing shells, because we got shell paths made of beautiful little clamshells. And when it gets wet, I mean, they get crushed down. And when it gets wet, some of the bits come in people's feet into the building. So I'm forever brushing them out, me and my colleagues. And I was doing that one Saturday morning, and I felt a hand on my buttock. This was only a few weeks ago.
Saucy.
Oi. That's not, you should ask first.
That's so funny.
But Colonel John is such a character. Actually, I've got a picture of him. I can show you a picture of him. He's absolutely fascinating. This is him. Sorry, can you see that?
I can see him.
That's the
there you
picture
go. Perfect.
That's him by day. Okay.
I love the light one.
I'm doing this left to right thing again.
Yes.
That's him. Okay, do you remember that? That's him by
I
night.
do. That's over the fireplace, right?
That head's just been put on, hasn't it? I mean,
yes.
Very. Anyway, so he fought with William of Orange. He was a great soldier. He was the governor of Stirling and Dumbarton castles. I mean, they're big deals. Dumbarton was a massive fortress on the west coast of Scotland, yes. And Viking territory as well, different eras, but. He was literally a big wig, and he had 4 wives. And when I first did investigation at the palace, he came across as being, well, he would only speak to men. If you tried to get an answer from him, he'd only speak to men. But yeah, we did get the feeling he did like to dress up, and he did like the company of men better than women. And so you got this kind of thing, oh God, okay, Lee, can you speak, because he's not answering any of my questions. We'd be doing simple things like glass on table or, have my ovalist there. And anyway, we got a picture of him. But one of the first spirits I got to know, or the first spirit I ever saw, was in a room called the Garden Room, which is a beautiful early Georgian bedroom. And it's very beautiful bed coverings on the 4-poster bed, very light and delicate. And that's where I saw Mary, who was his daughter. And I was only 4 days on the job. And I was unwrapping some tissue paper from candlesticks and things, because we close down in the winter at the end of October, wrap everything up and then let it rest over the winter. And because it's too cold to keep all the doors and everything open, we need to preserve everything with humidity levels and heaters on and stuff. So close up and close down. But I was opening up then, and I could see at the other bay window in the room, there was a young girl there, and she was like kneeling on the window and on the window seat and in a praying mode. And she had long dark hair and a Cervalis band with material down the back. And I just knew her name was Mary. And it didn't scare me at all. I'd never really experienced anything like this before. I was speaking telepathically to her. And I knew her name was Mary, and she said she was allowed out on Sundays to go and pick flowers and to go to church. Allowed out, remember?
Yes.
And then the next week, or as soon as I could, I got Lee in. And I said, right, what do you get here? What do you get here? What do you get? I was testing him. And when we got to that room, he definitely got a female at the window. He's rubbish with clothes and period dress. So he said, oh, it's a long dress. And she's being kept in here. And it's not a nice feeling. She doesn't, it's like being trapped in here. And her name's Mary. And so, boom, verification. So anyway, that was in 2015 when I first came to the palace. And I thought about Mary. And she would often, on a really dark night, if you sat long enough, if you asked her nicely, she would show herself in little pinpricks of beautiful lights. She was so lovely and delicate and just beautiful. And anyway, we over the years, we sort of had got this story that she was looking out of her window, because out of her window you can see the public well at the side of the building, between our building and the next building that we have called Bessie's Bar, which was an ale house. It's where our cafe is now. But there's a public well out there, and we think she was looking out the window at the well. And I just got a feeling she was looking out at a local boy who was going to get the water, and there was this relationship building. And we asked over many of investigations, was this true? Yes. And did your father approve? Kind of thing? No. And then you would find the spirit of the father coming in and taking over and not letting her speak anymore. And it was like, Rrr. So where we got a wrong impression of John, as we found out now. Anyway, over the years, my colleagues listened to me, because when I first started at the palace, there were some old guys who'd been there for a long time, and they would maybe bring out a spooky story at Halloween, and that was it. Ghosts, oh rubbish, you know.
Oh my word.
So there's an awful lot of places that were like that. And so I didn't care really. I just said what I got because I was excited. And I said, oh my God, did you feel that? Did you see that? And I write them down. And I've been writing this down forevermore. And what the visitors felt and what the staff feel. And all the staff, almost all the staff have had experiences now, because they're opened their eyes. They've opened their think, oh my God, that wasn't normal. What was that? And then they would tell me, and I said, well, that happened 2 weeks ago to this person. And you'll find the same things happening to females in the same places, or males in the same places. The feelings, and it's just amazing. But in Mary's room and in the Laird's room, funnily enough, women, always women, would feel breathless and tight round their throats and terribly sad. And just like, oh, I don't want to go in here. I feel like I'm being trapped in here, claustrophobic, and they want to get out. Well, last year, my colleague Fiona, who's also had experiences hearing footsteps and things and voices and whatnot, and quills in a pot going round and round one day. And she told them in the strong room, she told them to stop. She went out and in, thought it was a draft on her jacket, thought it was her. Just told them to stop. What would Linda do? Oh God, just stop. And they stopped. And then she went out again. Anyway, Fiona, skeptic. I love a skeptic. Yes. She did some research because of the paranormal things that we were finding, the breathlessness and the tight throat and the sadness. And she discovered that Colonel John's second wife, his first wife died after 2 months after marrying him from an illness. Devastating. He apparently adored this woman. His second wife, he brought to the palace from their big house in Edinburgh and did up the palace like a Georgian townhouse, because he changed all the little windows, little shuttered windows that had been there before, panelled the walls, beautiful fake marbling. I mean, it was high Georgian society fashion going on in the palace as best he could. Took his wife and daughter and other kids from Edinburgh to get clean air because it was so polluted. And my colleague found letters to prove that he'd paid for carriages to take them out into the countryside. And we also sadly found papers to prove that his wife Anna and his daughter Mary both died in 1723. Remember, we only found this out last year, just before their anniversary. Both died within 19 days of each other in the palace of consumption and TB.
Oh, no.
That's what the women were feeling.
Yes.
Breathlessness, and the sadness. And it was just like, boom. And then we found letters that said, oh, whatever will become of wee Davy. Now, wee Davy, you'll like this, wee Davy was his daughter's son, baby son, a year-old. Wee Davy's dad was the Earl of Leven, whose property was Balgony Castle.
No way.
Scottish Paranormal are the only group allowed to go. I mean, I'm getting the goosebumps now just telling you this. The connections and there's no such thing as a coincidence, but the connections between me being there and knowing people that have got properties elsewhere, it's tying in. It's just amazing. But the fact that these women are feeling these things in those rooms for years and years, and nobody's really noted it down before. I'm so honored to be able to do this, but it's fascinating. And the spirits are telling us their stories. And even, I'm not letting you speak.
No, I'm learning. I love this.
When I'm talking about closing down the palace and opening up again, well, last October, me and my colleague Fiona were in the principal stranger's room, the most important visitor's bedroom. And it's one of the first bedrooms you go into. And it's a lovely 1597 decorated room, not big because size didn't matter. I mean, there are small windows and small doors to keep the heat in, not because folk were wee. By the way, 4-poster beds were not small because people were small either. It's because you never lay down to go to sleep. If you lay down to go to sleep all the way, all your whole body, you would be imitating the dead and God might just take you away in the night. So you sat up with a bolster cushion behind to go to sleep. So
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, we weren't tiny at all. We do shrink in the rain occasionally, though. But we were closing up. I'll find this for you. It's really fascinating. Last October, when the palace closed, Fiona and I were wrapping up in this principal stranger's bedroom, and just for lols, I never thought, why did I never do this before? I took my Ovilus and a K2, and I put it on the bed, and I said, because it's all about the men in the palace, and the women were telling us stuff, and we'd only just found out about Anna and Mary telling us their stories about, sadly, where they passed, but it made us think more kindly of Colonel John as well, caring for his family, not a party animal at all, or a serious, well, he was a serious soldier, but, that wasn't his whole life. He loved his family, adored his grandchildren. So I just thought, put the Ovilus on the bed and ask out and just say, ladies of the palace, can you please give us some more? Just let us know where your portraits are, because we'd love to be able to show your faces and learn about you. That's all I said. And then we started wrapping up the candlesticks and, getting the rugs all rolled up, whatnot. And the Ovilus, the first thing it said was Aunt, A-U-N-T. And I thought, right, okay, log that. Interesting. And the next thing it said was Veronica. And we thought, never heard of Veronica before, there's James and there's, Anna's and there's Mary's and things, but not a Veronica. And then we went to the Laird's room and we were doing the same there. And the Ovilus never says the same word twice. It's very, very rare that it does in the same session. In fact, I've never heard the same word twice in the same session. It said Veronica again. And thought, right, okay, that's a bit weird. So went away. Next day, Fiona had been doing some research. She's a doctor of history. She's got a PhD in Scottish history. And she did whatever she does in her magic on her computer and went into files that I couldn't even dream of. Did she not find out that Colonel John's aunt was Veronica van Ersen van Sommersdijk from the Netherlands?
Oh, my word.
And granddaughter was Veronica. And so that's the two Veronicas and the aunt. I'm getting the goosebumps again, just telling you, because I think they love it. And
I
then
think so too.
She did a bit more digging. And this is in a museum in the Netherlands. Can you see her? That's
I can now.
That's beautiful Veronica holding a baby, baby Bruce. We think, specs on. Anyway, that's her baby, and he's a Bruce because she married Alexander Bruce. She married this guy. He's a dude, isn't he? Handsome dude.
Was he around the castle?
No, he's not in the palace, but he would have been. He would have been around. He is.
Was he around Stirling?
He's Alexander Bruce. He's the second Earl of Kincardine. So he's George Bruce's grandson from his own. Would
he have been around Stirling at all?
He may well have been. You want to
I
see
saw
him? Do you fancy him?
I do. No, I saw him.
He's a good guy.
Okay, that's good to know, because I saw him at Stirling.
And this is their daughter.
Okay, oh, isn't she lovely?
This is Lady Elizabeth Boswell.
Beautiful.
Now, Boswell, Johnson and Boswell is quite James and Boswell and his pal Johnson are famous because when James Boswell was quite young, this is her grandson, by the way, they did a tour of the Highlands. And after the clearances, when people were being cleared off the land and they went to America and Canada and all across the world because the landowners wanted to have sheep, basically. It was after the Battle of Culloden. Boswell and Johnson did a tour, and then they wrote a diary about the state of the people and the state of the land. It's absolutely fascinating. We actually had members of the Boswell family come to visit last week. And if it hadn't been for all this paranormal stuff, we would never have been able to tell them about the connection with their family member and us. I mean, it's bizarre. But
that is so cool, though. It is unusual indeed, but it's so very neat.
The spirits are helping us tell their story. And now, when I do my Spirits of the Palace tour once a month, get everybody out, all the staff, all the guests, all the visitors, and then I close the gates on a Saturday night and I take 8 people, paying guests, and I just do a palace tour and I tell the ghost stories, basically, where they happened and the places they happened. And I've never had one tour yet where nothing has happened. And I'm able to tell the story now, and I just know that they're so happy. But only it was early March, we have a big wooden chest in the first room you go into the high hall, and we've got an even bigger one that's a Dutch chest of drawers, and we know it's off the period, it's 1600s. But, you know, we always thought the only piece of furniture we had from the Bruce family, because when they moved out to their big Georgian mansions, they took all their furniture with them. But we were given a chest, a Dutch chest, big, heavy, dark wood chest. And it was supposed to have been descended from Mary Bruce, George Bruce's daughter. And it ended up in some auction in England, and some lovely dentist or something wanted to give it back to where it came from. Well, do you know who it belonged to?
Who?
Veronica.
Really?
She bought it. She gave it as a wedding present to her daughter, and her daughter gave it to her daughter, Veronica.
Oh, my word.
This is Veronica's chest. I mean, it's bizarre. And
this is so many tie-ins.
Yeah. It's just nothing, no such thing as a coincidence. But the spirits are helping us tell their story, and the more we ask, the more we get, and nobody's ever asked before, so it's the time. And one of my friends, she used to run the cafe in Culross for us, in Bessie's cafe for us at the Palace, and she has just married Charles Bruce, Lord Charles Bruce. And one day, when her father-in-law sadly passes away, I mean, he's 100 now, but when he passes away, she will be the Countess of Elgin, and she will have access to all these attics with all these portraits of the Bruce family ladies. And so I've asked Cherie, my friend, please can you look for us? And she said, of course I will, because the Ovilus also said attic. And the first person I thought of was Cherie, who's Lady Bruce and will get access to all these things. And it's like, oh my God. So
that's
excited.
Going to be so exciting.
Yeah, it's so excited. See, I knew I was sent there for a reason. I went for a job at the Palace after I was never involved in history or anything before. I was in radio, my first job in local radio. And then I got a job in PR and tourism for the Scottish Tourist Board. And then I went to work for Glasgow Tourist Board when it became European Capital of Culture in 1990. And then I had one baby died, and then I had 3 premature babies, and I took 20 years off, and I didn't do anything except be a mum, volunteer at the school. I ran a holiday home that we had in Largo as well. And I never really thought about anything. But when my kids started going to high school, I thought, I better do something. And somebody said, there's a job going at Culross Palace. And I didn't really know much about the Palace at all. It wasn't far away, but because I'm in the same home now. And I went for the job as assistant housekeeper, 15 hours a week. And I remember the interview, and it was fine. It was absolutely fine. But the guy who phoned me, who interviewed me, he's not there anymore. He said, why did you go for this job? And I said, because I'm good at cleaning other folks' houses, not my own, probably. And
I'm better with other people's houses.
And he said, you didn't get the job, Linda, but why didn't you go for the assistant manager's job? And I went, because I didn't know about it, and because computing has passed me by. I was in an office with a brick phone, and, that was about it. And word processing and a fax. It's kind of passed me by now. And he said, don't be daft. Just, we've got our own system here, and you'll learn it fast. And so I started 3 days later, and that was in 2015. And I've been duty manager ever since, and it's been blissful. I can't think of one day when I've never enjoyed going to work. Or special place. I'm so lucky. Do you know my commute to work from Bonnybridge to Culross over the river, Forth, and the Kincardine Bridge? is just delightful, and it's like going back in time every day. You know,
Yes.
it's just I just love it, and oh, I get to sing on the way as well in the car.
Yes.
It's just such a lovely thing, and it doesn't matter what the weather's like. You know, whether it's blowing a gale or, you know, beautiful flat calm water. We live by the sea, and you forget that. And I keep telling everybody, you can sense when it's a full moon or a new moon, because the tides are way out
Yes.
or way in, and everybody is behaving in the same mad way on those times. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced. And the more I speak to teachers and policemen and women and fire people and anybody that deals with crowds of people, tourists, organized as well, they'll say the same thing, and people go mental. They are lunatics.
They are lunatics.
Because
And
we're all water, aren't we? We're all kind of going in and out and moody and goodness knows what. So,
where I am
Special
right now
activities.
is I'm at my beach house right now, which is on the Gulf of Mexico, right
Wow.
across the street from me. And it gets crazy when we have spring breakers, vacationers. It gets crazy anyway. When they coincide, as you said, you can tell
Oh yeah.
what the cycle of the moon is in.
Yeah.
It's
You feel it.
insanity.
You can feel it. You feel it in the way, the spiritual activity as well. I mean, I haven't quite got that in depth. I should see if I had the brain I have now back then when I started recording all these things. You know, I would be noting the time of day and the, you know, well, I do the time of day, but I didn't do the phases of the moon or anything like that. But so many coincidences over and over again, and it's to do with the nature and the time of year and the weather, and you know, it's all, we're all pagan. You know?
We are all pagan, whether we want to admit that or not. We are all
off
pagan.
the land. We're off the
Yes.
land and off the earth, and you know, and for anybody to say that there aren't any UFOs is just wrong. Prove it.
It is just wrong.
You know,
well, there's way too many. I mean, for God's sakes, we've had 2 different presidents have encounters.
Yeah.
You know, here in our country, we've had 2 different presidents have UFO encounters that they went public about. And, you know, I will tell you what you could do, because you do date when you're doing your journaling, is you can just go back, look online at lunar cycles, and you can see what
exactly. Yeah.
You can go ahead and document that.
I was meant to write the book last winter when I was off hibernating, as we call it. But I just didn't have the time, because I have a poorly dog, and I'm devoting myself to my wee dog. You don't get many dogs that are 17.
I just went through that with my 14-year-old lab.
Oh,
so good on you.
Yeah, I'll write the book someday, but it's kind of writing itself, you know. And it's such a privilege to be able to take people around the palace. We don't do many investigations or things like that anymore, because I don't think it's necessary. I would rather help people understand why the spirits are there and tell them the history of the palace, and then tell them the ghost stories, rather than just go straight in with all the gadgets and everything. And, you know, I think it's important to learn about the people and think of them as being people and not just scary ghosts. You know, I hate the term ghost hunting. I really hate that.
I do too. I wouldn't want to be hated. I would never want to be hunted.
No.
I think investigation is the proper term.
Yeah.
No.
I know, I'm turning into a grumpy old lady, aren't I?
No.
But I'm absolutely not an expert. I hate people that call themselves expert or anything, but I am not. I'm just someone that's been around a bit, and I know this patch, you know. Oh, I should tell you the story of my friend. I don't know if you've heard of him, Andy Macklin, and he's Andy the Highlander, and he goes around in a big plaid and proper, not just a kilt. I mean, it's one stretch of material. He pleats it all, and then he wraps it just like the authentic Highlanders would have done. And it's his bed, it's his clothing, and it's his cover. And anyway, he used to be an electrician, and then he got a bit part in the Outlander series. Lots of things have been filmed in Culross, by the way, not just Outlander, and there's more to come. 39 Steps, Captain America, Little Vampire, they've all been there. Anyway, Andy has decided we became a tour guide way back in, I think, 2016, 2017. That's when I first met him. And he would bring people on these Outlander tours to the palace. And he's such a lovely guy, really, really lovely guy. And he started to have experiences of his own. Now, he's open-minded skeptic, the best. And at the end of one year, he was in a room called the Painted Chamber, because it's got these amazing painted panels, allegorical panels.
Which are, yes, and
they're
amazing.
Incredible. And anyway, it was Halloween. It was like the last day of the season for us. And we're going to have an event at night. I was doing a sort of walking tour with people, and we were all dressed up. It was great. But anyway, I had placed a bunch of bay leaves on the wall in this room because they keep the plague away. It was part of the story that we were telling. Keep evil away. And then in the room at the time, there was this baby's night dress that had been beautifully embroidered, and there was this sort of fake baby's sponge head on the top, on the back of a chair with a bonnet on it. And anyway, Andy was in the middle of the room with 2 Australians guests, and this head came flying at him across the room, followed by the bunch of bay leaves. Now, it's not easy to throw a bunch of anything, never mind get it to land in the middle of the floor. It's like they flew. And the Australians thought that he'd done this deliberately, but he hadn't. And he came running down to me and he said, Linda, what the hell's going on? And I said, oh, they're just saying hello or goodbye because it's the end of the season. And I didn't tell him until last year that Colonel John was one of the big Jacobite hunters after the Battle of Culloden. Anybody wearing tartan or anybody that was a Jacobite follower of Bonnie Prince Charlie was hunted down.
Oh my gosh.
This was Andy. He was being told to get out. You know?
See ya. Whoa.
Yeah. Anyway, Andy's always felt that he belonged to Culross, just like I do. And I'm sure I've had previous life here. 2 years ago, a dear friend died, and he ran the gallery in Culross. And at the end of lockdown, only 30 people were allowed to go to a funeral, and this was even more people than before when the lockdown started. 30 people were allowed to be at the funeral, and we were to follow a piper and the hearse from the townhouse in Culross up the hill to the Abbey, and then no singing allowed. We all had to wear masks and everything. Anyway, as we were walking up, Andy was wearing a normal suit. I saw him in period costume. I saw him with a short collar. He had a powdered wig on. Andy's not got any hair. He's shaved his head. He's very handsome. He's got a lovely beard. And he had his hair in a ponytail. He had his crisscross tie around his nice tailcoat, breeches on, white silk stockings and buckled shoes. This is how I saw him all the way through up the hill and into the church. He sat 5 pews in front of me, and I felt I had a big dress on. I was sitting next to my colleague, the gardener, but I felt like a big skirt on and a bonnet, and I felt this was my pew, and we were always meant to be here, and this was very normal. And I felt I know him, and I'm really fond of this guy 5 pews in front. And at the end of the funeral, I saw him the same way with a pile of books under his arm. Now, I told him this later on, and he said, it's the weirdest thing. I just feel like I belong here. I feel like I belong here. Yeah. Forward in time, I'm a hypnotherapist. Andy asked me to regress him. So I do one life with him, and he has a life, and he doesn't mind me telling you this, by the way. We have a life in Stirlingshire, and we're fighting to protect his local village, blah, 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 1400s. The next life, he was standing outside the Canongate churchyard in Edinburgh, in the high street, just down from the castle, up from the Holyrood Palace, cobbles, but it was mucky. He was seeing carriages coming and going. He told me he was well dressed, and he had books under his arm. 1776 was very, very important to him. He lived with his mother. He was well known in society. He didn't want to tell me his name. I kept asking, and I said, "Well, the churchyard is very important to you. Why would that be?" And he said, "I'm there." So I said, "So you're buried there?" And he went, "Yes." And at the end of all that, I asked him lots of things. I'm cutting a long story short. He said his name was Smith. And after that, I said goodbye to Andy. He said, that's amazing. And he felt like he'd lived this. He felt like he'd lived this. And it just made sense to him. Anyway, long story short, he goes away. About an hour later, he said, my son has just come home with a project from school about Adam Smith, the economist. And he said, I've just thought, do you know what? That's just fired up. He went to Google Adam Smith, buried in Canongate churchyard. When did he write his main book, Wealth of Nations? 1776. Now, Andy's always felt comfortable around French people. He could always feel that he could speak French. And he loved Culross. And I thought there's got to be a connection somewhere. So I Googled and I Googled and I Googled. And I found out, oh my gosh, boom, eureka moment. Did Adam Smith not take one of the Bruce boys around France as a tutor?
Oh my gosh.
He did the tour of Europe, but mainly in France, with one of the Bruce boys from up the road in Abbey House. And he was their tutor, books under the arm, crisscross clothing. And last week he went to Edinburgh. He goes there all the time, but he didn't have time to go and see the statue of Adam Smith. And he saw the Adam Smith statue. He sent me pictures of the man's legs. He said, Linda, those calf muscles are my calf muscles, and they're weird, but they're mine. It was just bizarre. But
that is so cool.
Oh my God. And I said, I know we've been friends before. We really have. And this all made sense. Speaking the French and everything. Oh, just brilliant. I love it.
That is so awesome. I'm so glad you shared that, because
you couldn't believe it.
But we know when it's somebody that's been, together for many lifetimes.
Connections are just there. And, I can look into his eyes sometimes and I kind of know what he's thinking. And, we have the best fun because there are some lovely spots in Culross in the palace where I can hide when I know he's bringing guests around. And, and just as he's talking about the protection marks whatever night, I go, hello. And he does the same to me. He's so funny.
That is too funny.
Oh, gosh. Oh, it's
those poor guests who probably freak out at first, right? And then they're just so glad to have you there.
But people forget also, spirits love a laugh. They love to it wasn't all gloom and doom in the past. They love to have a laugh and a joke. And when we're discussing, and when I'm doing my tour, my after hours tour, the Spirits of the Palace, and you say something funny, or you mention, like I mentioned just recently, a cod piece, and how one of the spirits looks a bit like Danny DeVito, and he was into leather in a kinky kind of way, and we had leather makers in town, and I think he used to go and visit them. My K2 was laughing with us as we were saying.
That is so great.
So funny. So it's a good laugh.
It's all about communication, right? When we are we're not trying to force a conversation. We're not trying to, you must do this. When it's a relationship, it's so much fun.
Oh gosh.
And, there's a group, well, there's a location here called, the Old Paulding Jail. Mm-hmm. And that place I upset the spirits the first time I went to do something there. Not my first time there, but I had gone back to do a live show, and I upset them. I ticked them off.
Wow.
But ever since then, because I went back and, I apologized before I left and was like, I'm sorry. I did not mean to make you angry. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to help, because it was a help thing. And since then, I've been several times, not nearly enough because it's a 9-hour drive from here.
Wow.
So, that's a long drive. And it's, in our country right now is not someplace that I'm going to travel overnight, to get anywhere right now. We're in a very bad spot. But, it just is, we have so many people here. Nobody knows who they are. We've had an open border for almost 4 years now with no checks and balances. if you, unless you're an American leaving the country and coming back, then you checks and balances. But if you're not from here, you just come on in.
Sure.
And in fact, when I was in Scotland before, there was a question of if I could get my second vaccination. I did not have to be vaccinated to come into Scotland.
Wow.
But I did not come home unless I had my second vaccine. And I was like, I'll just go to Mexico. I'll just come over the border. I mean, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But it was really, even at that point, it was like that. So I'm a little bit nervous to travel. I'll fly, but I will not drive solo because we're having a struggle at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're coming over soon.
I'm so excited. I cannot wait to get to see you again. And
I'll introduce you to my spirits.
I would
this time in the right frame of mind. Because they know, they know so much more about us than we'll ever know about them. They're just
indeed,
fantastic.
Because they've been here, done that.
Oh yeah.
And if we open ourselves up to it, we've been there, done that too, because I do believe that we reincarnate.
Yeah.
And, and that's why places are so familiar to us when we happen across them.
And I think that they definitely can read us. They know our intentions, they can read our auras or whatever. And I mean, I think I can up to a point with people. You just know with folk, whether it's good or bad aura, and it's kind of difficult when you've got a group of 8 strangers, and you just know that one's just not enjoying it or really hates every minute. They just want to get to the pub and they want to come with their girlfriend.
Yeah.
But actually, they're the challenge, because I love that, because once you get them hooked, or once they have an experience, and one night one guy did, he had the experience of the night, because a spirit, one of our guards, like a cavalier type guy who's been over the years, blew in his ear as he was standing at the doorway listening, and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hello," and moved away. And he told his girlfriend, he told me, he came running out in the courtyard. He'd been bored all night until then, and he came running out in the courtyard and told his girlfriend, and she was furious because she hadn't had an experience. But now he's away buying all the gadgets, and he's like
a temper.
I've had people. I had a woman there this week who this last Saturday, this is her 3rd time. I've had locals that have been 4 times now, and it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. And
that is brilliant.
Another old guy who was a retired architect, he said he's only here for his wife, coming on my tour. And by the end of the night, he said, "Linda, you've turned me." I haven't done anything. It's just the spirits, they're just brilliant.
Well, it's your interpretation of them for people too. But we're out of time, chick.
That was quick.
I know. I told you, right?
I know.
But thank you so much for giving me this time. I appreciate you, and I cannot wait to be with you again. So
I'm just honored that you asked me. And I mean, gosh, I could talk for Scotland, but it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much, Kat. You just look amazing, and it's so nice to be with you on your show.
You too. All of the above.
Everybody.
So for everyone listening, if you have not been paying attention to Scotland as far as a paranormal destination point, you got to check this lady's site out. Because Culross
Palace,
Culross is one of the most amazing places. The history is astounding, and just being there puts you back in time. So I hope that everybody comes to see you, and I'm so excited. I'm going to. So
I know. Never mind the conference. I've only got 50 minutes to speak then.
Oh, well, we can hang out after you speak, because I'm really excited to go. I am not going to Contact in the Desert this year because I wanted to come to this one. But thanks again. And for everyone listening, thank y'all so much, because y'all are the reason that we do this. And I love the paranormal, and I know that y'all do too. So I hope that you enjoyed, Linda, and I will talk to you same cat time, same cat channel. Good night.